I gave my only healthy kidney to my daughter and thought the story ended in gratitude. Weeks later, a letter arrived. An invoice for 42,000 marked payable by mother. What do you do when the child you saved by giving her your own kidney sends you a 42,000 bill instead of a thank you? Stay right here, because my name's Samantha Smith, I'm 62, and this story proves a mother's love can cost more than blood and bone, but it can also spark a comeback nobody saw coming. Tap subscribe and drop your city in the comments so I'll know where my story is landing today. Let's make sure no parent ever feels alone after a medical betrayal. I grew up believing miracles travel on hard-working feet, not angel wings. Mama raised us in the 5th Ward of Houston, where we learned early to spell budget with 2 letters and an O. When life needed fixing, you fixed it yourself. So when my daughter Lydia phoned last winter whispering, "Mama, the doctor says my kidneys are shutting down," that old 5th Ward grit kicked in before the fear could. Lydia is 38, software engineer by day, watercolor dreamer by night, married to Devin, handsome, polite, more spreadsheets than hugs. Her insurance covered dialysis, but not the endless waiting list for a donor match. Living donors, 40 to 60 grand pre-op to post-op cash. Our family doesn't have that kind of change lying in the sofa cushions. At first, she refused to ask me. "I can't let you risk surgery," she said, but I saw terror perched behind her lashes like a bird too tired to fly. I told her the truth. "Baby, I was born with surplus love and 2 kidneys. God knew somebody would need one." Tests showed my left kidney glowed healthy as sunrise. Devin did the math, counted vacation days, arranged GoFundMe posts that barely reached 3 digits. Meanwhile, Lydia's EGFR numbers slid toward the cliff. The surgeons drew the line: transplant now or face irreversible damage. Decision day landed the same week my Social Security letter arrived. I signed the consent forms with hands steadier than a preacher's benediction. The operation lasted 6 hours. I drifted through anesthesia's cotton fields, woke to IV beeps and pain that hummed like broken neon. Lydia lay 2 rooms down, her new kidney already filtering toxins like it had waited its whole life for the promotion. Devin brought us matching bouquets. "White lilies for purity," he said. I preferred the cafeteria jello. Lilies reminded me too much of funeral homes. Recovery was slow. My incision throbbed in rain. My energy evaporated after 3 steps. Still, every text from Lydia felt like medicine. Heart emojis, love you, mama, little gifts of dancing kidneys. The day I managed a full lap around the ward, she sent a selfie blowing a kiss. Best mom award forever. I tucked that image into my hospital Bible next to Psalm 121. Then 2 weeks after discharge, her replies shortened. K. Busy. Later. I told myself she was overwhelmed managing anti-rejection meds and remote work. Devin said she needed boundaries to heal. Fine, I backed off. Another fortnight, and the messages stopped altogether. Phone rang twice. Voicemail chimed. Nothing. Worry gnawed, but pride kept me from knocking on their townhouse door uninvited. The envelope arrived on a humid Monday. Thick, official return address. A private transplant billing firm in Austin. I balanced it on the kitchen counter, heartbeat rattling my ribs like dice in a cup. Inside, a statement for $42,000, itemized as Lydia Smith recovery balance, guarantor Samantha Smith, due immediately. I read it twice. Vision tunneling. A sticky note fluttered out. Mom, insurance only covered removal on your side. Hospital says you're responsible. Please handle ASAP. Li sank onto a folding chair, incision scar burning as if someone had taken the kidney twice. My monthly disability check barely covers rent on my 1-bedroom senior apartment. I survive on coupon tuna and the church pantry's generosity. 42,000 might as well be the national debt. Worse than the number was Lydia's silence wrapped in bureaucracy, a bill where gratitude should be. For 3 days, I paced the apartment, courage wrestling outrage. I reread every discharge paper, no clause naming me guarantor. Devon's GoFundMe page now showed zero balance, campaign closed. Comments full of praise for mom's selfless gift. Gift apparently came with invoice. On the 4th day, I dialed Lydia. Ring slid into voicemail. I left a message equal parts calm and earthquake. Sweetheart, we need to talk about this bill. No response. Grief mutated into flint. I was raised to fix things. I dug out a manila folder labeled Plan B, my secret backup of every scrap of savings. $3,000 in a credit union CD, $600 cash in a coffee can, and a pre-approved equity offer on the apartment lease I'd sworn never to touch. Still a canyon short of 42 grand. I called the hospital, demanded patient advocate review. They confirmed. Devon had signed me as financial guarantor the morning of surgery, my signature nowhere. Fraud? Maybe. Betrayal? Certainty. That night, I pulled on the cardigan Lydia had knit me for Christmas 2 years ago, raspberry yarn's softest forgiveness, and drafted a letter. To Lydia, to Devon, to the billing agency, to a medical malpractice lawyer I Googled at 3 a.m. I sealed them but couldn't sleep. Painkillers dulled the incision but not the heartache. As dawn painted the window peach, I whispered to empty air, Lord, show me how to walk when my own child closes the door. Next, you'll witness what happens when a frail mother storms a transplant billing office, uncovers Devon's hidden clause, and stakes her future on a courtroom she never thought she'd see. Don't miss the truth that money can't silence. At 8 sharp the next morning, I slid into a city bus, clutching the manila folder like a passport to a country I never wanted to visit, and rode downtown to the gleaming glass tower that housed Trident Medical Finance Solutions. Every jolt of the bus sent a javelin of pain through my still-healing abdomen, but anger moves faster than nerves. I made it across the marble lobby and straight to reception before either could slow me. I'm Samantha Smith, I announced, planting the $42,000 bill on the counter. And unless someone here shows me my signature, y'all are trying to rob a one-kidney grandma. The receptionist blinked, summoned a supervisor, and within minutes I was seated in a chilly conference room staring at a projected PDF. There it was, a guarantor section with my printed name. But the signature resembled a lazy scribble looped like Devon's on our Christmas gift tags. I pointed. That's forgery. My hands shake from neuropathy. I sign block letters. The compliance officer's neutral mask flickered. She excused herself, returned with the transplant coordinator and a security manager whose badge read J. Alvarez, Fraud Prevention. Alvarez spoke first. Mrs. Smith, do you allege your daughter's husband signed on your behalf? I met his gaze. He signed against my will and billed me for the privilege of saving my own child. Alvarez requested a handwriting sample. I obliged, writing Psalm 121 in careful capitals. He compared loops, slants, pen pressure. The compliance officer paled. We'll need to open an internal investigation, she said, during which your account will be flagged. Hold. No collections activity. Relief cracked the stone around my lungs, but cold fury remained. I asked if Lydia knew her husband forged the form. The coordinator confessed patient responsibility notices had gone to Devon's email only, standard when a spouse handles paperwork. My daughter, fragile post-surgery, hadn't seen the bill at all. It felt like a fist to the gut. Lydia's silence was ignorance, not ingratitude. Devon had intercepted my calls, censored my worry. gratitude replaced by guilt he'd orchestrated. Bus ride home blurred behind tears and traffic noise, but clarity sharpened the moment I reached my apartment. I dialed Lydia from my landline, voice firm. Devin answered. "She's resting," he said. I spoke before he could hang up. "I know about the forged signature and the ghost bill. Hospital froze the account." His breath snagged. "Samantha, let's be reasonable." Click. He hung up. 2 minutes later, Lydia called on a different line, frantic. "Mom, Devin says you're upset. What's happening?" My throat threatened to close, but I laid out every fact, the bill, the fake signature, the hospital's hold. She gasped, said she'd never signed me as guarantor, that Devin told her insurance covered everything except my post-op costs. I pictured him forging nonsense while she slept off anesthesia. "I'm coming over," she whispered, voice shaking with both incision pain and betrayal. I tried to dissuade her, but love on fire ignores doctor's orders. Within an hour, a rideshare deposited her at my door, pallid yet determined. Seeing Lydia's face, sunken cheeks but eyes still my baby's hazel, burned away the last residue of anger. She cried in my arms, careful of stitches, apologizing for silence she didn't know had fallen. "He took my phone when Bill stressed me," she confessed. "He said peace was part of healing." We called Alvarez on speaker. He confirmed a fraud investigation, possible criminal charges. Lydia's expression shifted from hurt to steel. "If Devin tried to bankrupt my mother, I'll press charges myself." She spent the afternoon photographing every document in my folder, forwarding copies to her transplant social worker, and changing all her email passwords. By evening, Devin arrived, flinging open my apartment door without knocking, face flushed. "Lyd, you shouldn't be out of bed." She stood, wobbly but fierce. "Did you forge my mom's signature?" Devin's gaze darted. "I handled paperwork so you could rest." She repeated the question. He stammered about medical debt, how the insurance shortfall would ruin their credit, how Samantha's social security seemed unused. Lydia's voice sliced through his excuses. "She gave me a kidney, Devin. That's not unused. It's priceless." She pointed to the door. "Leave." He tried to plead, but Alvarez's earlier promise of legal follow-up hung heavy in the room. Devin left, slamming wood that splintered like his scheme. 3 days later, Lydia filed a police report. Devin was served with a cease and desist and a notice of investigation for medical billing fraud. The hospital rescinded the entire balance, citing administrative error and malpractice risk. Lydia petitioned for annulment, moving into my tiny apartment temporarily. I insisted she take the bed. I slept on a recliner, incision finally easing. Together, we drafted a GoFundMe update, truth this time, not Devin's curated pity, which strangers boosted past 20,000 in 48 hours. Messages poured in. Parents who donated organs, seniors tricked into medical debt, lawyers offering pro bono support. The greatest gift came from the transplant surgeon, who wrote a letter waiving all remaining facility fees in light of extraordinary circumstances and exemplary maternal sacrifice. I framed it beside Lydia's pre-op photo in Psalm 121. Bills vanished like nightmare smoke, replaced by a paper trail of forgiveness and accountability. Devin, under investigation, lost his financial planner license. Last I heard, he was negotiating a plea deal and mandatory ethics courses. Lydia, stitches healed, returned to watercolor commissions, something Devin had dismissed as frivolous. One evening, she painted 2 kidneys entwined like blooming magnolias and sold prints online, earmarking proceeds for an organ donor assistance fund. 6 months post-transplant, my incision a pale seam on my flank, Lydia and I stood outside a small 2-bedroom bungalow we'd rented together, She handed me the keys. A home where guilt has no address. We hugged, lungs expanding easy in debt-free air. Later, as we unpacked, she found the hospital lilies I'd pressed in my Bible, brittle but intact. She tucked them in a frame labeled love. That costs. Love that lasts. I looked at my daughter, alive because my body made room, and realized that kidneys and forgiveness share a secret. Both work best when freely given, both can filter poison into something life-sustaining, and both, given the chance, make space for second beginnings. Our new bungalow still smelled of fresh latex paint when the next aftershock hit. I'd just finished taping Psalm 121 above the doorframe, Mama's old ritual for warding off trouble, when a thick envelope landed in the mailbox. Return address: Law Offices of Bryce, Gallagher, and Todd. Inside waited Devon's signature brand of audacity, a civil summons claiming emotional distress, loss of income, and defamation, because Lydia and I had maliciously destroyed his reputation. The figure he demanded, $200,000, was printed in bold, dark ink that seemed to suck the light from our sunny kitchen. Lydia read it twice, hands trembling hard enough that the paper rustled like dry leaves. 6 months earlier, that sound would have stabbed me with fear. Now it stirred something else. Cold, seasoned resolve. I brewed 2 mugs of chamomile and slid one across the table. We fought for life, I said. We can fight for peace. She exhaled, cheeks flushing pink instead of pale. Let's finish what we started, Mama. First call went to Kendra Marsden, the pro bono malpractice attorney who'd helped freeze the bogus transplant bill. Kendra chuckled, low and dangerous, when she heard Devon's claim. Defamation requires a shred of falsehood, she said. He'll have to prove your kidney donation and his forgery are untrue. Still, she warned, litigation drains energy, and Lydia's kidney numbers were finally stable at an EGFR of 72. Stress, the nephrologist had said, could tip that scale. Kendra filed a counterclaim for fraud and elder financial abuse, moved to consolidate Devon's civil suit under the criminal investigation already chugging through county court. Court dates stacked like dominoes. Restitution hearing in 8 weeks, civil pretrial conference 10 days later. They're trying to scare us into settlement, Kendra said. We'll outstare them. Meanwhile, life kept blooming around the coming storm. Lydia's magnolia kidney prints went viral on an organ donor subreddit. Orders poured in from ICU nurses and grateful transplant recipients. She funneled every sale into the Second Chances Art Grant, $500 micro awards for donor families to cover gas, hotels, and missed work days. Within a month, she'd funded 11 strangers. Each thank you note she received felt like another stitch, knitting her scar into something purposeful. My own hip still ached on rainy days, phantom sibling for the kidney I'd parted with, but strength crept back. I joined a twice-weekly chair yoga class at the community center. The instructor, a silver ponytailed veteran named Marco, greeted each student with a namaste and a pun. On week 3, he asked for volunteers to demonstrate modified poses. I raised my hand and balanced in a seated warrior 2 that made my incision burn and my spirit soar. After class, a soft-spoken woman named Teresa approached me. She'd donated part of her liver to her brother and now worried about mounting bills. I connected her to our transplant social worker network and slipped a micro-grant application into her hand. Pay hope forward. Watch it multiply. 2 weeks before the restitution hearing, a federal investigator visited our bungalow to collect final statements. Devon's forgery, he said, had triggered a Medicare fraud flag because the hospital had billed under the wrong guarantor. If convicted, He faces restitution, fines, maybe jail, the agent explained. Lydia tightened her grip on her water glass but nodded. Justice can be a scalpel, necessary, precise, a little terrifying. The night before court, storm clouds stacked over Houston, fat with Gulf moisture. I couldn't sleep. Neither could Lydia. We sat at the kitchen table assembling evidence folders, surgeon's waiver letter, GoFundMe history, signed affidavits from the hospital's compliance officer and handwriting expert. At midnight, Lydia opened her laptop and played a voice memo she'd saved from the ICU, her groggy post-op whisper, "Mama, thank you for my second life." Tears found new trails down our cheeks, but they felt like rain watering roots, not floodwaters drowning dreams. Courtroom 3B smelled of stale coffee and institutional carpet cleaner. Devin arrived in a fitted charcoal suit with a new attorney at his side. No wedding ring, I noticed. His eyes scanned us, lingered on Lydia's surgical scar visible above her blouse collar, then darted away. When the clerk called the case, Judge Hernandez listened to Kendra's summary, eyebrows climbing at the forged signature evidence. Devin's lawyer argued stress, misunderstanding, financial desperation. Kendra responded with the hospital's fraud report and the insurance's notice of premium reimbursement after the bogus claim reversal. Then Lydia stood. Her voice, though soft, filled the room. She spoke of waking each morning alive because her mother chose pain and risk, of discovering weeks later that same mother was being hunted by hospital collectors. She ended with a sentence that hushed even the bailiff. Honor is measured not by what we owe, but by how we repay what's been freely given. Judge Hernandez ruled swiftly. Full restitution to Samantha for any costs incurred. Punitive damages set at $25,000 payable to the Second Chances Art Grant. Court fees on Devin. He referred the forgery to the district attorney with a recommendation for felony prosecution, and an appointed aside suggested Devin seek counseling to understand the meaning of gratitude. Outside, humidity wrapped us like a damp blanket, but relief sliced through it. Reporters hovered. Kendra shielded us. Back home, we toasted with ginger ale, alcohol off Lydia's menu for good. I felt pride, sure, but also an echo of pity. Devin had gnawed his own future to bone. All we could do was choose not to sit at that table again. In the weeks that followed, our life tilted toward ordinary. Doctor checkups, Etsy print shipments, yoga class, early morning walks where I practiced full breaths without incision twinges. Yet ordinary carried new hues. Lydia's laugh lighter, my steps surer. The bungalow's front porch crowded with thank you postcards from grant recipients. One Saturday, Caleb drove down from college, surprise visit. He brought a potted jade plant. Hard to kill, he joked, but the note attached read, "For roots that survive transplant." He'd earned an A in bioethics and wanted to volunteer for the grants review committee. Lydia wrapped him in a hug, tears dotting his t-shirt. I handed him the jade plant and thought, the lineage of generosity just found its next custodian. Some nights I still run fingertips over the scar on my side and mourn the simplicity life lost when trust first shattered. But then I picture the spreadsheet Lydia updates every Sunday, grant tally at 52 families helped, and feel the scar pulse like a second heartbeat, pumping resilience through the places where betrayal once lived. Love, I've learned, can bleed, can bruise, can even be invoiced. But when it refuses to stay silent, it also writes return to sender on every bill cruelty tries to deliver. You'll see how a viral news segment forces the transplant cost crisis onto the state legislature's floor, why Caleb's bioethics professor joins the crusade, and what happens when one forged signature ignites a policy that could save thousands of lives. Don't miss the next leap from personal victory to public change. The transplant cost scandal should have petered out after Devon's sentencing, but a slow news week can turn a spark into a searchlight. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Houston's Channel 6 ran a medical minute about Lydia's forgery case. The producer, combing court dockets for human interest stories, stitched security camera stills of Devon walking into court to a voiceover about soaring transplant bills and one Texas mom who paid in flesh, then got a bill anyway. Before we'd finished leftover turkey, the segment had surfaced on Reddit's r/Medicine and jumped to national morning shows. Strangers tweeted kidney invoice, demanding to know why living donor families were dragged into six-figure debt. My prepaid flip phone, silent for months, pinged itself hoarse with media requests. Lydia's Etsy print sold out in 48 hours. She promised back orders while gulping electrolyte water to keep her new kidney happy. Caleb, back from college for the holiday, saw opportunity. Media's listening, Grandma. Let's give them math, not just outrage. He recruited his bioethics professor, Dr. Hart Guzman, a brisk woman who wore sneakers with her blazer and had a weakness for data sets. Together, they built a spreadsheet of average out-of-pocket costs for living donors in Texas. Lost wages, travel, insurance gaps, post-op meds. The number, 18,740 median, made even casual readers gasp. Dr. Hart Guzman mailed the analysis to State Representative Alicia Verma, a freshman lawmaker whose platform included healthcare transparency. Within a week, Verma's aide called, "We're drafting a Donor Cost Protection Act and need testimony. Are Ms. Smith and Ms. Washington willing?" Lydia looked at me, eyes a whirl of nerves and resolve. I squeezed her hand. "We were willing to trade organs," I said. "Words are lighter." The hearing landed in mid-January. Austin's skies petulant with freezing drizzle. We took an early bus. Airline seats too risky for Lydia's kidney. Rental car too pricey. Caleb and Dr. Hart Guzman met us at the Capitol, lugging binders. The committee chamber smelled of stale coffee and recycled ambition. Lobbyists in tailored suits whispered in corners. An older man wearing a U.S. Marine hat clutched paperwork. Another donor, I guessed. Representative Verma opened with statistics, then introduced witnesses of lived experience. Dr. Hart Guzman led with data slides. Caleb ran the clicker, tie slightly crooked, but voice steady. These numbers hide in private GoFundMe pages and defaulted credit cards. Living donors reduce long-term Medicare expenditure by millions. Why make them bankrupt first? Applause wasn't allowed, yet murmurs hummed. Lydia spoke next. She recounted her terror at organ failure, the way insurance jargon blurred until all she heard was ticking time. She described the moment she woke with my kidney inside her, gratitude flooding veins, and the second, darker awakening when Devon's debt notice arrived. "No Texan should fear billing more than rejection meds," she finished, voice cracking but clear. Cameras flashed. Committee members shifted, some wiping eyes. My turn. I stood slowly, cane squeaking on tile, scar itching under my blouse. "You will hear cost-benefit numbers," I began, "but I speak in mother's math. 1 kidney equals 1 child's life. The bill we got said that miracle cost $42,000. That's a price on love. I ask you, who among you wants to tax your own salvation?" Silence pooled thick. Representative Verma nodded, lips pressed tight. Opposition came from the Texas Hospital Association, a suited spokesman warning the bill could discourage institutions from offering live donor transplants. Caleb slid a note across the table to Verma's staff. Hospitals save on dialysis costs. Hart Guzman had the figures. She handed them to Verma, who held them up like holy writ. The spokesman's argument wilted. 2 hours later, the committee voted 8-1 to advance the bill. Outside, cameras clustered. Reporters fired questions. Lydia answered with practiced calm about her art grant, urging donors to log expenses for reimbursement once the act passed. I added that our farm plot now provided vegetables to transplant patients on low-sodium diets. Headlines the next morning read, "Kidney Mom Shakes Capital, Donor Bill Clears First Hurdle." Momentum snowballed. Late-night hosts riffed on invoice happy hospitals, and national transplant organizations offered endorsements. Devon, meanwhile, accepted a plea deal. 18 months probation, 200 hours community service at a dialysis center, and mandatory fraud prevention courses. Lydia didn't gloat. She said justice was a door, not a destination. March brought the House floor vote. I watched from the gallery, clutching Psalm 121 on a creased index card. The bill passed 96-49. 2 weeks later, the Senate followed. The governor signed it under oak leaf sunshine, pen strokes flanked by living donors in T-shirts that read, "My organ, not your invoice." Lydia handed him a print of her magnolia kidneys. He promised to hang it in the health committee hallway. Media frenzy cooled, but change had rooted. Hospitals now had to cover donor lost wages up to $15,000 and cap out-of-pocket expenses at $2,500. A state-funded reimbursement pool launched, seeded by redirected dialysis savings, exactly as Caleb's spreadsheet suggested. Our Second Chances Art Grant became an official partner processing claims. Requests flooded in. Lydia hired Teresa, the chair yoga classmate, as coordinator. One warm April afternoon, Representative Verma visited the farm plot. Tomatoes blushed red and marigolds flared like sunset. She shook my hand. "Policy rarely starts at spreadsheets," she said. "It starts with a mother who won't stay quiet." I smiled, feeling the scar beneath my ribs pulse like a small drum. "And with kids who listen," I added, nodding to Caleb, adjusting irrigation lines. That night, Caleb returned to college, leaving the jade plant taller on our sill. Lydia packaged 30 prints for donors whose costs the new law had erased. I brewed chamomile, hip less sore these days. We clinked mugs. "To kidneys," she said. "To laws," I replied. "And to bills returned to sender." We laughed. Light, unburdened. Outside, the mobile van's headlights flashed as Marcus pulled in from Beaumont, where he'd launched a pilot workshop on budgeting for post-transplant meds. The runway of redemption, it seemed, had grown into a highway. As I prepared for bed, I traced Psalm 121 on the wall with my fingertip, then whispered to the darkness, "Love, unpaid and unafraid." In the hush, I almost heard a harmonica's faint amen. Passing a law feels like finishing a marathon and finding another starting line taped to the pavement. 2 months after the Donor Cost Protection Act took effect, our bungalow was swimming in paperwork. Reimbursement forms from Amarillo, testimonies from Lubbock, even a handwritten plea from a rancher near El Paso who'd sold 3 breeding mares to fund his wife's lung transplant. Lydia and Teresa processed claims at the kitchen table, inhaling my lemon verbena candles, while rain drummed the roof in thick Gulf rhythms. I wrote thank you cards until my wrist cramped, then switched to voice-to-text emails, signing each, "Your courage keeps the promise alive." Just as the backlog began to shrink, another envelope appeared, this one bearing the seal of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Inside was an invitation, though it read more like a summons, to testify before a federal advisory panel on living donor protections. They'd read about our Texas law and wanted qualitative insight for possible national legislation. Lydia's face blanched at the idea of cross-country travel, but her nephrologist offered a solution. Testify remotely from the Houston Federal Building's secure teleconference suite. Less stress, no cabin pressure, he said. Caleb, ever the strategist, added, and if we nail it, 49 other states get the homework answers. Preparation swallowed the next 3 weeks. Dr. Hart Guzman compiled fresh statistics. Representative Verma coached us on federal jargon. Marcus scheduled extra financial workshops so we wouldn't leave local donors stranded. Late nights, Lydia and I rehearsed statements. She'd speak as saved daughter, I'd speak as mother donor. Each time I practiced the line, my scar is the receipt of love given, not debt owed. My voice wobbled, but by the 10th run-through, it steadied. Testimony day dawned hot enough to steam the bayous. In the federal building's anteroom, a technician adjusted Lydia's lapel mic while I smoothed my thrift store blazer. On the screen, 30 faces assembled. Senators' aides, transplant surgeons, one grim economist, the chairwoman, a stern woman with silver curls, opened with cost projections that made my head spin, national donor out-of-pocket spending estimated at $320 million a year. Then she called on Mrs. Lydia Smith, software engineer and kidney recipient. Lydia inhaled, fingertips grazing the outline of her transplanted organ as if to thank it, and told our story in plain sentences. The diagnosis, the midnight form decision, the forged signature that sparked a movement. When she finished, silence hung heavy. Even pixelated faces looked chastened. My turn. I leaned toward the camera, cane propped against my shin, and addressed them like church family. Policies, I said, our promises wearing paperwork. I described the relief in donors' voices when they learned our fund had covered flights, antibiotics, childcare. I showed them a quilt Mrs. Luella had sewn with appliqued kidneys of every shade, proof that patched-together love can cover what the market leaves cold. Questions came rapid fire. Would a national cap inflate hospital fees? How to audit fraud? I answered each with Fifth Ward clarity. Transparency portals, capped admin costs, penalty clauses tougher than Texas heat. Dr. Hart Guzman chimed in remotely with slides. Representative Verma, seated off camera by special permission, quoted the dialysis savings already tallied since Texas passed the law. The meeting ran 20 minutes over. Bureaucrats rarely skip lunch, so I sensed victory. The chairwoman closed with, "We will advance this recommendation to the secretary." The screen winked dark. In the hush that followed, Lydia sagged against me, tears wetting my blazer. "We did it, Mama," she whispered. I answered, "We opened the door. Now they have to walk through." Outside, reporters waited. Before microphones could swarm, a red-haired woman in scrubs approached clutching a toddler. "Ms. Washington?" she asked. "I'm Nora. My brother used your grant for flight money. He gets my liver lobe next month." Tears blurred her freckles. She pressed a tiny handprint painting into Lydia's grasp. 2 overlapping shapes, one adult palm, one child's. Capturing green and gold fingerprints, Lydia hugged her gently. Mindful of incisions under skin, reporters filmed it all. And by nightfall, the clip had 1.2 million views captioned, "Kindness goes viral." Momentum has a way of flushing out opposition. A week later, we received a cease and desist letter from the National Private Hospital Council accusing our foundation of public misrepresentation and hinting at tortious interference with hospital billing processes. Kendra laughed so hard she snorted. "They smell federal regulation coming," she said, drafting a blistering reply packed with audit data. Still, the threat rattled Lydia's nerves. Her creatinine crept upward. The nephrologist prescribed rest, less caffeine, more watercolor. She obeyed, painting late-night magnolia kidneys until calm returned. While legal chess played out, our farm plot burst into fall abundance. Tomatoes gave way to sweet potatoes, marigolds to collard greens. Marcus organized a pick-for-pay-what-you-can weekend. Donors collected produce, leaving envelopes of whatever they could afford. We raised $800, enough to fund 2 more micro-grants. Caleb sketched plans for a greenhouse so the plot could produce year-round. He sent me a text from campus: bioethics, plant botany, better kidneys. I replied with a winking emoji, proud of the grandchild who mixed science with soil. Early November, the Secretary of HHS announced a task force to draft national donor cost regulations, citing compelling testimony from Texas stakeholders. Lydia and I high-fived like teenagers. Hospitals protested. Dialysis lobbyists grumbled. But public polling showed 78% support once people learned donors were paying to save relatives. Politicians read polls. Legislation seemed inevitable. One evening, as golden hour light poured into the bungalow, Lydia found me at the kitchen table reviewing grant ledgers. She sat, placed my hand over her scar. "Sometimes I feel guilty," she said, "that my kidney cost this much noise." I shook my head. "Noise woke people up. That's worth 1 scar." She smiled, tears shining. "Then let's keep singing." We rehearsed our harmonica magnolia lullaby for a holiday benefit concert. Lydia on gentle vocals while I coaxed silver notes. Letters still arrive, some grateful, some angry. But every envelope reminds me a scar can be both wound and doorway. And every day the balance tilts farther toward justice. Another donor reimbursed. Another lawmaker persuaded. Another Devon somewhere thinking twice before forging an old woman's name. The smear campaign burst like a July thunderclap the morning after Thanksgiving. An exclusive expose on a cable business channel accusing the donor cost protection push of bankrupting rural hospitals and suggesting I, Samantha Smith, was secretly profiteering from micro-grants. The segment flashed unflattering stills of Lydia and me, screenshots lifted from our committee testimony, while a suited pundit claimed our foundation skimmed 20% administrative fees. We learned of it when neighbors texted frantic emojis. Minutes later, reporters were camped outside the bungalow, thrusting microphones at Lydia's scar and asking if she felt weaponized. Lydia's blood pressure spiked. Her nephrologist ordered immediate rest. I made chamomile, dialed Kendra Marsden, and turned on every lamp in the living room. It was going to be a long, bright night. Kendra traced the hit piece to the National Private Hospital Council, the same lobby that had sent us threats. She advised a 2-pronged defense: airtight transparency and louder storytelling. First, we uploaded our audited books, every penny in and out, onto the foundation website with an interface so simple a schoolchild could read the pie charts. Caleb programmed the page between finals, color-coding every grant in green and every admin cost in stark, skinny gray. A mere 3%. Then we shot a 5-minute video from the farm plot, under autumn collards and marigold seed pods, explaining exactly where the money went. Marcus held the camera while I spoke into the cool wind about scars and receipts. Lydia beside me in a knitted cap, voice steady as she quoted the law the hospitals feared. The video was live within 18 hours. By dawn, views had eclipsed the cable segment 5-1, the comments section a wildfire of donor testimonies. They paid my rent during recovery. I'm alive because of them. But hospitals have deeper pockets than truth, and by Monday a full-page ad ran in the Houston Sentinel claiming mom-and-pop funds can't guarantee patient safety. Kendra emailed, They're aiming to rattle your credibility before the Senate vote. We responded with data. Dr. Hart Guzman published a peer-reviewed letter in JAMA citing reduced long-term dialysis costs and 0 donor deaths attributable to financial hardship under Texas's law. The lobby countered with glossy mailers in swing districts. Momentum teetered. Lydia's kidney function dipped 3 points. Her doctor blamed stress. I scheduled a media blackout at home. No alerts, no cable. But when a PR war goes, national silence invites speculation. That's when Caleb's greenhouse delivered an unexpected twist. He'd been experimenting with nutrient-dense microgreens tailored for post-transplant diets, lower potassium, higher iron. One Friday, he called from campus lab, voice fizzing, "Grandma, preliminary assays show these greens spike hemoglobin better than standard supplements." Dr. Hart Guzman connected him to a dietitian at the transplant center. Within a week, the hospital agreed to a pilot study. The press loved it. Kidney recipient's family grows superfood to aid recovery. Headlines pivoted, reminding the public why we'd started. Donations surged again. Lobbyist mailers began to look shrill. Still, Senate support wavered, hinging on a late December committee vote broadcast live. Representative Verma asked if I could testify by satellite with a personal touch, something beyond numbers. I thought of Walter's harmonica tucked in its velvet pouch, silver reeds polished by Marcus's careful hands. The committee allowed musical accompaniment as cultural statement, and so, on a crisp Wednesday, I sat in a polished wood hall in Austin, cane at my side, microphone clipped to my collar, harmonica cool between my palms. Lydia watched from the gallery, color back in her cheeks. I spoke briefly. How transplant bills had once silenced my daughter's phone, how new laws turned that silence into conversation. Then I lifted the harmonica and played the farm lullaby, slow, deliberate, each note a scar unashamed. The tune floated over marble walls, a sound both mournful and defiant. Committee members stilled. One aide wiped a tear. When the last note faded, the chair nodded to the clerk, the vote. 5-3 in favor of forwarding the national bill. Reporters dubbed it the harmonica heard round the Senate. Twitter clipped the melody. Within 24 hours, I'll Let Donors Live trended across 40 states. The hospital lobby tried one more gambit, a press release alleging Caleb's microgreen study was unsafe experimentation. But the transplant center preempted them, publishing IRB approval and showcasing patient testimonials. A grandmother in Dallas filmed herself eating the greens, laughing, "Tastes like victory." Under mounting public goodwill, the lobbyists backed off, issuing a face-saving statement about ongoing dialogue. On New Year's Eve, snow flurried rare petals across Houston rooftops. Lydia and I hosted a small watch party in the bungalow. Marcus, Tanya, by video from Beaumont, Caleb home on break, Teresa, Mrs. Ortega, Dr. Hart, Guzman. At midnight, the phone pinged with an email blast from Representative Verma. The Senate calendar would include the full donor protection bill in February. Fireworks crackled outside. Inside, we toasted with sparkling cider. I gripped Walter's harmonica, feeling the cold metal warm in my hand, and whispered to the group, "Next year, no mother signs an organ with a hidden price tag." They answered with a chorus of amen and harmonica trills, off-key but exuberant. As color burst over the city, I pictured scars across rib cages and abdomens shimmering like constellations, mapping a sky where love no longer arrived with an invoice. February on Capitol Hill was all steel gray skies and scarf-whipping winds. The morning the Donor Cost Protection Act reached the Senate floor. Lydia and I watched from the visitors' gallery, each of us wearing a lapel pin Caleb had 3D printed, two tiny kidneys forming an infinity loop. In the well below, Senator Maren Cho, herself a liver donor sibling, opened debate by replaying 20 seconds of my harmonica lullaby over the chamber audio. The silver notes echoed against limestone like a quiet anthem for invisible scars, and suddenly the grim rows of suits didn't seem so immovable. Lobbyists prowled the back aisles, but their talking points had lost oxygen. Op-eds praising Texas's cost savings now outnumbered the ads decrying them. Caleb's microgreen pilot study, published just days earlier in Transplant Nutrition Quarterly, sat stapled to every senator's briefing folder. Its charts proving that a handful of fresh science could cut recovery time anemia by 18%. The vote began at 11:42 a.m. Eastern. Lydia gripped my hand so tightly the incision under my blouse tingled, a phantom memory rather than pain. One by one, names rolled across the electronic board, green lights for yay, red for nay. We'd been warned it would be razor thin, but by the time the clerk reached W, the count stood 50-48 in favor. Senator Ibarra hesitated, glanced up to the gallery, saw Lydia's scar peeking above her collar, and pressed green. 51. Applause cracked like thunder. Reporters sprinted for exit doors. I simply exhaled a breath I'd been holding since the day Devon forged my name. Outside, sleet stung our cheeks while microphones bloomed like winter flowers. Lydia spoke first, voice ringing. Today the country decided that organs given in love will never again be billed in fear. I added only, send the invoices back to Mercy, and felt the crowd lean in as if tasting that sentence. Within hours, the president tweeted support. House leadership scheduled a concurrence vote. Analysts predicted final signage by spring. Home in Houston, momentum became logistics overnight. HHS officials asked our foundation to draft guidelines for the National Reimbursement Portal. Kendra marshaled pro bono lawyers into a task force. Dr. Hart Guzman took unpaid leave to chair the data subcommittee. Caleb deferred his spring internship to code a secure upload system, layering sonification cues so visually impaired donors could track claim status by melody, a nod to the harmonica that had moved the Senate. Marcus expanded the financial literacy tour to Louisiana and Oklahoma, towing a borrowed camper he painted with the infinity kidney emblem. Yet victories carry shadows. Medicare administrators insisted the portal be beta tested with 300 live cases in 30 days. That meant fronting costs before federal reimbursement. Our endowment could handle 50. Panic nipped. But Mrs. Ortega wrapped her clipboard like a gavel. We crowdfund the gap, $20 at a time. Lydia designed a limited edition print titled Receipt Canceled. Tanya created a spice trio labeled Hope, Healing, Heritage. Marcus streamed nightly harmonica lessons that people could tip. The internet opened its wallet. Nurses in Alaska, farmers in Vermont, a kindergarten class in New Mexico that mailed quarters taped to construction paper kidneys. In a week, the fund sat at 80%. Then a donation pinged for the remaining $20,000 from an email tagged generoustexaneanon.org. I suspected Judith. Lydia guessed Senator Maren Cho. Caleb swore it was a Silicon Valley philanthropist. Whoever the ghost, the portal beta launched on schedule, and by April 97, donor families had checks in hand. One breezy evening, as azaleas blazed fuchsia in Houston yards, Representative Verma visited our farm plot, now ribboned with greenhouse tunnels Caleb had engineered from reclaimed scaffolding. We strolled past rows of kale bred for low oxalate, sweet potato vines destined for dialysis clinics. Verma handed me a manila folder. Texas had secured federal matching grants for state transplant nutrition gardens, and she wanted our model copied county by county. I pressed Psalm 121 into the soil beside a newly transplanted seedling and whispered thanks. Lydia's nephrologist cleared her for light jogging. Her EGFR held steady at 74. She celebrated by painting a mural on the bungalow's exterior wall. 2 interlocking kidneys cradling a harmonica, marigold petals drifting like bills torn to confetti. Local news filmed the unveiling. The anchor signed off saying, "In a city known for big hearts, one family's heart just rewrote the ledger." Summer crept close. Devon's criminal trial concluded with a plea. 18 months house arrest, restitution already paid. Not to us, but into the National Donor Fund. A poetic twist Kendra negotiated. Lydia didn't attend sentencing. She spent the morning teaching a free watercolor class to pediatric transplant patients, mixing scarlet and violet into miniature magnolia blooms. "Forgiveness," she said, "looks best in bright colors." On the first day of June, the president signed the National Living Donor Financial Protection Act. Cameras captured my cane-steady walk to the desk, Lydia's steady hand guiding the pen I offered the president, a cheap ballpoint wrapped in floral duct tape. He signed anyway. The room clapped. I heard Walter's harmonica in the applause, a chord striking true through time. That night, our entire crew, Marcus, Tanya, Caleb, Teresa, Mrs. Ortega, Dr. Hart Guzman, gathered under the greenhouse roof strung with fairy lights. We passed around iced tea, watched fireflies mimic the tiny green lights of a Senate vote, and listened while Marcus played a fuller, surer version of the farm lullaby. When he finished, silence sat sweet and complete. Lydia raised her glass. To every invoice, we turned into a harvest. Glasses clinked. I closed my eyes, feeling the scar under my ribs hum like a tuning fork in perfect pitch with hope. Some fights leave you bloodied, some leave you wiser. The rarest leave the world gentler than you found it. My fight, born from a forged signature and a $42,000 bill, had done all 3. And as the night dissolved into cricket song, I knew one more truth. Love that refuses to be invoiced also refuses to be exhausted. Tomorrow we would plant another row, fund another claim, teach another senator how a harmonica note can balance a budget. The runway was lit far beyond what I could see, but I was ready for every mile still glowing ahead. The National Living Donor Financial Protection Act had been law for barely 6 weeks when the second, quieter wave arrived. Emails from small-town clerks, reservation clinics, and inner-city transplant units, all asking the same question. How do we make the paperwork less terrifying? Federal templates existed, true, but a template without translation felt like a locked door. Representative Verma suggested a traveling roadmap bus. 1 bureaucrat, 1 nurse, and 1 living donor rolling state to state hosting pop-up enrollment drives. The feds loved the idea but offered no staff. So our ragtag family volunteered before common sense caught up. By mid-July, the roadmap bus was reality. A retired school bus painted mint green, kidneys plus infinity stenciled on each side. Caleb mounted solar panels for the laptops. Marcus converted the rear row into a mini stage for harmonica demos. Lydia packed sketch pads to keep nervous children busy, and I stocked a shoebox with floral duct-taped pens identical to the one the president had used. We christened it Mercy Miles and charted a loop through 5 states in 8 days, starting with the Oklahoma Panhandle. The first stop, a fairground in Guymon, felt like preaching revival in a dust bowl. 20 folding tables, 1 generator, and heat that warped plastic brochures before noon. Yet 57 donors or donor families showed. many arriving in battered pickups or church vans. They carried shoe boxes of receipts, dog-eared pill logs, letters threatening collections. Teresa, flown in from Houston, triaged paperwork while Mrs. Ortega barked instructions like a drill sergeant. Fill line 12, skip 13, initial 14. I floated table to table, offering water and calming words. Scar peeking above my cotton blouse as silent proof you could survive both surgery and bills. In Elk City, a Navajo grandmother named Alma handed me a necklace of turquoise beads. "For your harmonica," she said, explaining how turquoise wards off bad spirits. A perfect talisman for hospital invoices. Lydia later hung it from the bus mirror, where it clicked softly over every pothole. Wind farms whirred in the distance as we processed 63 more claims, each adding rows to Caleb's growing spreadsheet of savings to Medicaid. Trouble waited in Wichita, where an official from a major for-profit transplant network appeared in a tailored blazer, questioning our authority to host sign-ups. She brandished a clipboard of compliance concerns and threatened to call security. Kendra, patched in by speakerphone, asked one question: "Are you denying access to federally mandated reimbursement?" The blazer retreated. That night, Marcus found a flyer under the windshield wiper: "Beware pop-up scams." He laughed, tore it into confetti, and tossed it out the emergency exit like celebratory snow. Day 6 found us in rural Missouri, camped outside a volunteer firehouse that doubled as town hall. Rain pounded tin roof while we processed forms by flashlight, solar batteries drained by clouds. Mid-storm, a teenage boy arrived with his father's paperwork. The man had donated a kidney to an older brother and now faced eviction. Lightning cut power entirely. In the dark, the boy whispered he wanted to be a nephrologist because kidneys made Dad a hero. I felt my throat knot. When the lights blinked back, Lydia slipped the boy her last Magnolia kidney print, signing the corner with a flourish. "Paper may wrinkle in storms," she said, "but ink endures." Our final stop was Baton Rouge, hosted by Marcus's Beaumont crew in a high school gym fragrant with jambalaya. Local Zydeco musicians offered to trade a set for a harmonica cameo. Marcus obliged. The lullaby, now a lively riff that sent middle-aged volunteers spinning across the hardwood. Between dances, we processed our 300th claim of the trip. Totals tallied on Caleb's laptop showed $4. 8 million reimbursed or in queue, a number once unimaginable. Exhausted but euphoric, we steered Mercy Miles back toward Houston. On a moonlit stretch of Highway 90, the bus engine coughed, then seized. We coasted onto the shoulder, steam curling from the hood. Caleb diagnosed a burst radiator hose. Too hot to touch. Stranded, we formed a circle on the gravel. Lydia's phone buzzed. A voicemail from HHS. The portal had processed its first 1,000 claims successfully. Pilot phase declared a model for national rollout. In the faint glow of a rest stop streetlight, our breakdown felt oddly poetic. A pause forced by overwork at the exact moment we learned the wider machine could run without us. A tow truck eventually hauled the bus to a motel lot. While Marcus negotiated repairs, the rest of us gathered poolside beneath buzzing sodium lamps. Lydia dozed in a lounge chair. Her kidney numbers remained steady, but fatigue clung like humidity. I traced turquoise beads along my harmonica, thinking of Alma's blessing. My body ached, yet purpose thrummed stronger than pain. Before turning in, Caleb opened his laptop, added engine repair receipts to Mercy Miles's expenses, and said, "Grandma, next tour we budget a mechanic." We laughed, a sound mingling weariness and faith. I looked at Marcus, at the son who once screamed for rent and now measured redemption in miles and reimbursements. Every detour still heads forward, I murmured. He nodded, harmonica resting in his lap like a compass. Tomorrow would bring towing invoices, catch-up emails, maybe another smear from commerce networks, fearful of shrinking profits. But tonight, in a roadside motel between towns we'd never planned to visit, the runway lay clear as moonlight on asphalt, and the harmony of kidneys, courage, and duct-taped pens carried us to sleep. The video of our broken-down bus hit social media before the tow truck even reached Houston. A passing trucker had filmed Mercy Miles steaming under the dim rest stop light, and when he learned who we were, he added a caption. These folks spend everything to help organ donors. Now their own engine gave out. Who's got their back? Within 12 hours, Iridia fix Mercy. Miles trended top 5 nationwide. Mechanics offered parts, musicians offered benefit concerts, and a vintage bus club in Florida suggested a cross-country solidarity convoy to escort us on future routes. The outpouring felt like being carried on a tide we hadn't asked for, but suddenly needed. While Marcus and Caleb oversaw repairs, new radiator, upgraded fan, donated labor, Lydia and I prepared for one last showdown. The National Private Hospital Council, cornered by public sentiment, had filed an injunction aiming to freeze reimbursement funds until administrative oversight safeguards were created. Translation: stall payments until donors lost patience. Our lawyer Kendra urged mediation, but I sensed we needed a symbolic gesture bigger than any courtroom brief. That's when the turquoise bead clicked against my harmonica, and an idea sparked. We called Alma, the Navajo grandmother, and asked permission to replicate her bead as a pin. Then Caleb coded a turquoise tracker widget on the donor portal. Every time a claim funded, a bead lit up. We launched with a live stream from the refurbished bus, Marcus framing the shot as I held the original necklace. These beads won't let darkness through, I told viewers. Every pin sold keeps cash flowing while bureaucracy sleeps. Orders flooded in, 20,000 the first week, enough to cover reimbursements if the injunction stuck. The hospital lobby didn't expect a jewelry rebellion. Facing headlines like Turquoise versus Titans, they agreed to a televised debate. Their CEO, Dr. Leighton Parks, opposite me on a Sunday news program. In studio lights, I felt every year of 62, but Alma's bead sat over my heart, cool and steady. Parks recited fears of rampant fraud. I lifted a spreadsheet showing 98% accuracy audited by 3 firms. He warned of service reductions. I read a letter from a rural hospital CFO praising dialysis cost drops. Finally, I played one quiet harmonica note, just enough that the host leaned in. That sound kept my daughter alive, I said. If you can invoice it, be my guest. Parks looked off balance. The segment went viral before we left the building. 2 weeks later, the council withdrew its injunction, citing productive dialogue. Privately, Kendra emailed, they knew they'd lost the PR war. Turquoise pins continued selling, funding a reserve that soon made the portal self-sustaining. We transferred managerial oversight to HHS, fulfilling our promise to scale beyond a family operation. Meanwhile, Marcus's nightly harmonica streams, originally fundraising fillers, caught the ear of a blues archivist who submitted Farm Lullaby Reborn to the Grammy Roots category. When the nomination list dropped, our living room recording sat among polished studio tracks. Marcus laughed until he cried. From rent shouts to red carpet, he said, polishing the battered silver instrument. Lydia announced she'd paint a commemorative print whether he won or not. By October, Mercy Miles, flanked by vintage buses from that Florida club, embarked on the first official donor solidarity convoy. Houston to Sacramento with 13 stops. At every city, a local donor rode shotgun, beads flashing turquoise in sun and headlights alike. Network news covered the departure. Late-night hosts cracked affectionate jokes about kidney cowboys. But the true finale waited in Sacramento, a ceremony where the last major for-profit transplant chain signed a pledge to adopt the national reimbursement guidelines. In exchange, they received 10,000 turquoise pins and a photo op with Lydia's mural backdrop. Optics mattered. We let them have it. Victory likes many faces. Back home a week later, we gathered at the farm plot for harvest, winter greens glossy under low sun, microgreen trays, densest carpets. Caleb lugged crates to the mobile Dignity van, now retrofitted with a backup engine courtesy of that vintage club. Mrs. Ortega rang her trusty clipboard bell. Final count, she declared. 12,000 donor claims reimbursed, $43 million kept out of collections. Cheers rose, harmonica trilled, and I felt my scar pulse gentle approval. That night the bungalow brimmed with friends. Teresa arrived with yoga mats and a casserole. Representative Verma brought state-shaped cookies. Dr. Hart Guzman toted a framed page from the Federal Register, the Act's regulations now law of the land. When conversation lulled, Marcus lifted the harmonica. Lydia, scar soft beneath her blouse, began the farm lullaby in a low hum. Caleb joined on a microgreen shaker, a repurposed spice jar filled with dried marigold seeds. I added Psalm 121 from memory, words threading through music like stitching through cloth. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in. As the last note faded, silence swelled with something larger than applause. A collective exhale of journeys ended and one's beginning. Tanya, visiting from Beaumont, raised her glass. To scars repurposed, she said. Glasses clinked, reflecting string-light constellations on the ceiling. I stepped onto the porch alone later, turquoise pin warm against my chest. The night air carried distant highway hum, perhaps another convoy someday, and the faintest echo of harmonica, memory blending with breeze. The world felt wide, but the runway beneath my feet was wider still, lit by every claim paid, every law passed, every bead that refused to let darkness through. I breathed deep, pain only a whisper now, and spoke into the quiet. Love unbilled, mission fulfilled. The stars, bright as hospital fluorescents once were harsh, seemed to answer with their own silent amen.